Okay, here we are. We're up to date. We're feeling good. There's no label up here that says you need to reboot your computer. The next thing we're going to do is we need to create a new user. Because right now we're running as root. And the way you can tell you're running as root is, well, it says root here. Clear this. So it says root, but the other way you can always tell you're running root is there's an octothorpe right here, or a hash sign, whatever you want to call it. That's a surefire way of you're running as root. We don't want to run as root. Root does not double check anything we do. Root is like, okay, you know what you're doing. Root is the highest permission level on an operating system. It allows you to do anything and everything. You want to rm-rf / as in delete your directory, it'll let you do that and it will not stop you. So we never want to run things as root. If something does require root, that usually means like, hey, let's put some thought into it. So the first thing we do after we update our software, we're going to create a new user, a user that's not root but has root access. We call root access super user. Usually, and we run the sudo command to say, I'm going to do this as root for this particular command. Sudo stands for super user do. It allows you to run the commands and programs as root. So it allows you to run as root as necessary, but our default is never, ever, ever to run as root. Ever, ever, ever. It's tempting because you're like, I hate sudoing all the time. It's such a pain. But it's there for a reason. These are well-trodden paths. So keep the permissions as minimal as possible that you need to run the programs. So next, we're going to create a new user because we don't want to run as root. So we're going to create a new user. We're going to add that user to the sudo group. We're going to switch that user. And then we're going to check sudo access just to double check that our user is actually working. Yeah, so if you did transfer your name servers over to DigitalOcean and they still haven't propagated out, it's just going to take a while. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, mine finally did.
But it can take a few hours. It can take a few seconds. It really varies on the internet. Like I don't. That's kind of all I can say. That's why we do it pretty early in the class rather than a little bit later. So you probably ran into some interesting things, creating a new user, some weird prompts. So let's walk through them. So we don't want to do things as root. Very, very dangerous. Never do things as root. If you have in the past, you got lucky. But again, not doing things as root will save you a lot of trouble and pain. So I want to create a new user. So I'm going to say add user. And let's call it gem to keep it simple. Give it a password. I keep mine pretty simple here too. For all these values, feel free to fill them in if you want. I'm just going to hit default. Information is correct. Cool. No worries there. You can put room number if you want. I'm not really going to change anything. I think it's just an artifact of Linux. Next thing we're going to do is we want to make sure I can do stuff as root, as gem, but only when I want to. So we're going to add the user gem to the user sudo group. So to do that, we're going to use the user mod command. So user modify. So user mod, we're going to say add -a to the group, capital G, to the sudoers group, super users do, gem. Awesome. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to switch over to gem user. So we're going to say su, switch user, gem. All right. And I'm still in the root, so I can go home if I want. You don't need to. And look, I have my own directory and everything once I create a user. So every time you create a user, it creates another directory under /home/whomever. Now we want to check our sudo access. To do that, there's a lot of ways of doing it, but I like to access the auth log. These are things you normally can't access as a regular user. You can only do as root. So let's just double check we have access. So I'm going to say sudo cat, remember that dumps the whole file, /var log. And we want to look at the auth log. It's going to ask me for the password. And there we go. So we've confirmed that this user has sudo access. We confirmed that it all works, and we have this new user. Great. So the next thing we want to do is we want to disable Well, we want to disable the root access. We definitely don't want to have root open to the public, because that's the number one thing all, we'll say, not so good actors want to do, is they want to log in as root, because again, once you have root, you can do literally anything. There's unrestricted access to the system. But to do that, we're going to need to create a new way for our user we just created to log into our system. So in our home directory, we want to create an authorized key file. And authorized keys is where our public key is going to sit. So that means whenever we log in as my user, it's going to check the public key, and then it's going to authenticate against my private key. That's going to allow me to log in as a different user entirely. There's a lot of different ways of doing this. This is probably the most simple way. So let's do that together. So I'm going to switch to my home directory. It's clear. Home, remember, is always tilde. So let's create this directory. If it doesn't exist, ls-la. I don't see a .ssh directory, so let's make one. Make dir.ssh. Now we can cd into that. And we're going to create an authorized key file. So there's different ways of doing this. We'll just touch it for now, rather than vi, because we don't have the key yet. That way we can switch over to a new terminal without having to exit out. Authorized keys. Sure I spelled that right. ls. OK. So the next thing we need to do is we need to put our public key into the authorized key file. So there's different ways of doing this. I'm going to do this the long way. This is probably the way you're at. You're also welcome to open up a new terminal, get your public key and paste it back in. But I'm going to do this the longer way. So I'm going to exit. And notice I didn't exit the server, because I actually just created a new shell whenever I switch user. I just created a new shell with that new user. So when I exit, I'm just jumping back to the shell I logged in originally. So I need to exit again. Next, I want to cat that public key. So that was full stack front end pub. And I'm just going to copy this. There is a command to do this all at once, and I used to teach that, but it's so long and so like verbose that it's not really saving anything. This is probably more the default way. You usually don't exit the server to paste things back in, but it's OK for the course of this class. So now that I have my key, I'm just going to log back in as root, because we still don't have the login for Gem, my new user, yet. I'm going to switch back over to Gem, just because I don't like being root. cd, and then we're going to edit that authorized key file. Authorized keys. And I'm going to insert. I'm just going to paste that in. And then I'm going to right quit. All right. So now let's test it out. Let's see if it worked. So we're going to exit. Then we're going to exit again. So this time I'm going to SSH, but I'm going to use my new user instead of root. Let's see if this worked. Hey, there we go. Not bad. Not bad at all. And if that didn't work, one, double check you spelled authorized keys correctly. It's kind of a longer file name. Double check you copied and pasted your public key, not your private one. You'll notice the private one, because the private one is substantially longer than your public one. And then make sure you exit in, and make sure you're trying to log in with your new username at your IP address. Yes.
I guess it's kind of obvious here, but the SSH key isn't associated necessarily with, you can have it associated with as many users as you want on the server. It's purely that you're connecting from my laptop is giving me access to the server with whatever user I want, as long as I've added the public key to the user on the server.
Yeah, exactly right. The question was, are SSH keys tied to users or your computer? They're mostly tied to your computer. You can use one SSH key to do everything, like use the same one for GitHub, use the same one for your computer, use the same one for anything. Totally up to you. I'm not against that. SSH is usually pretty secure. I don't think you need an SSH key for every single instance, but it's up to you. You can make it complex, you can make it simple. But in general, it's usually a pretty safe way of doing doing things.